Welcome to the Wake Up and Lead podcast. This is your host, Hampton Dortch, and I am transitioning out of a sales role, and it's actually all I've done for my entire career. And so what I figured I would do is share the top 12 things that I have learned. There's nothing significant about the order of them, and there's nothing significant about the number 12. It's just the amount of things that came to my mind as I was writing notes down. Now, everything is sales. And so in the new role I'm moving into, I will certainly be selling a lot. And I think whatever you do in life, there is some component of sales to it. And so a lot of the tips that I share today, maybe they're a little bit more beneficial to people that have a role that is actually in sales where maybe they have a quota and they're earning commission. But whatever you do in your life, I really do think that these things are going to help you. And so rapid fire background on me. I grew up with a dad who I still have. Jeff, hello to you. You're probably listening to this. He and I are very tight, and he was in sales for the vast majority of his career. He's now training and coaching leaders at his company. So we're in sort of similar worlds, actually. But for probably nearly 30 years, he was selling. And so I always watched him do that. And you all know this. Academics, I would say I was not, the most prestigious when it comes to that. So I figured I probably wouldn't be like a lawyer or a doctor, but I always liked people. And so I figured that I would just be in sales. And I'm really grateful for my story and the people I met along the way and what God did to even land me the role that I did at WildSpark. But I kind of knew that I wanted to be in sales. I knew that that's probably my best path to at least success early on in my career. And so I was interning at WildSpark where I still am today. I started there in January of 2020, and I was a sales development rep in SDR. So WildSpark, while we do leadership development, we are a tech company. And so, there's so many tech companies in the world, and most of them, the language that they use is the entry-level role is SDR, sales development rep. A lot of times what you're going to be doing is making upwards of 50, 60, sometimes 100 cold calls a day. You can send cold emails, you can send messages on LinkedIn. And so that's what I did for almost a year before getting promoted to account executive. So when you're an SDR, primarily your role is to book meetings, to find people that are interested in buying your product, to meet with you to see if they want to buy it. But the thing is because you're younger and not as experienced, and you don't know your product as well, you're in the entry-level sales role. So your primary job is to get the person to show up to the meeting, and then you kind of pass them off to an account executive who then takes them through the whole sales process. So I began as an SDR for nearly a year, and then I was an account executive for about 3 years, and now I'm transitioning into the customer success team at the company I work for. I get to lead that team, which I'm really excited about. And so the way that works is because we're a tech company, we are a subscription-based model. And so what we do is somebody will pay for WildSpark for 1 year. Now, we have built the product in such a way that we want them to stay with us for 2, 3, 4, 5, and beyond years. If you think about Netflix, you probably almost never cancel Netflix. Most of their people stay with them for forever, if you will. And the way that, they make money is by obviously selling new people, but Netflix has like so many customers that they probably make way more money off their existing customer base, and then probably honestly raising the prices every once in a while than they do on even like new customers. And so for us, as we continue to grow, it's as important, if not more important, for us to keep our current business than it is to even generate new business. And so what I'm now focusing on is keeping our current customers, and then at some level upselling them as well. So there's still going to be a lot of these sales components that apply to the current role that I'm in, but wanted to give you that context there. And I wouldn't say that I'm, some major sales expert. People spend their entire careers in it, but these are some foundational things that I've learned. And a lot of these things that I've learned are things that I learned from people that are like sales experts, whether it's I've met them personally, whether it's a book that I've read, whether it's something on LinkedIn, if you will. And so let's hop into these 12 and let's see what you think. So number 1, be interested over interesting. I've said this nearly 1,000 times on this podcast, and this is so much more than sales, but definitely in sales. If you can be interested over interesting, you will have so much more success really in anything in life. And so what that looks like is when you have a product that you're selling, yes, you want to tell the person you're selling all the amazing things about it. Yes, it has all these great things, but you probably have a lot of competitors as well that have some really great things. And so your customer is coming into the conversation expecting you to be interesting, but you can blow their mind by being interested. No. Tell me about you. What's your story? What's your role? What would I find you doing if I ran into you on a Saturday? I mean, the amount of like success that I've found by just recognizing the person on the other end of the Zoom call, phone, table is a real human being and being interested in their life, that has gone such a long way. And so again, this is not just something for someone that's in a sales role. It doesn't matter what you do. In any conversation in life, if you choose to be interested in the other person instead of trying to be interesting yourself, ironically, they're going to find you more interesting anyways. They're probably going to like you more. So that's number one. Number two, this is huge. If your prospect, if the person you're selling to has ever been on a podcast or they've written a book or they post things online and you don't reference that either when you're reaching out to them or when you get on a conversation with them, you are lazy, period. So a lot of people haven't posted things online. Now, as more and more generations get into positions of leadership, like people my age, you're probably going to be able to find anything because we've been around and we have social media and everything. Right now, I'm selling to people typically in their 40s, sometimes 50s, maybe 60s, sometimes 30s, but like some of those people don't have social media as much. But I'm telling you, if I find a CEO, if you Google their name, the odds that they've been on maybe one podcast with horrible quality with 3 views with no microphone are relatively high. I mean, I would say like if I'm talking to a CEO, at least like a fourth or fifth of them have been on some podcast or there's some video on their company website. Basically, what I'm saying is do the work. If you can show someone that you know them, and if you can show someone that they're not just another prospect to you, it will go such a long way. And also, it's just free. Like most reps, most people selling are not going to do the work to learn about other people. So like an example would be there is somebody who I was selling to once who had a podcast. They had about 50 episodes. And all I did was went and listened to a few of the podcasts and I felt like I knew them. Now, what I could have done, and look, no problem with using AI. Some of the stuff is on YouTube. There's all this AI out there that you could find a 45-minute YouTube video, press a button for free, and get 10 bullet points of what was in the YouTube video. You don't even have to watch all 45 minutes of it. The point that I'm trying to say is if the person that you are either trying to like book a meeting with or the person that you already have a meeting with and you're running like a sales call with them, if they have put things out into the world for people to see and you're not looking for that stuff, finding it, learning it, and then referencing it, you're lazy. You're not putting in the work. They're giving you like free things to ask them about. I mean, the amount of times that I've found this old podcast that this person I'm selling to has been on and someone's like, tell me a little bit about yourself. And then they talk about like their dog named Rufus or something. And then I mentioned that on the call, you should see their face. I mean, it's people have this desire to be known. And if you can do the work to show them that it was worth your time to learn something about them and then bring that up, it will go such a long way. There's no better way to build rapport than that. You're being lazy if you don't do that. Number 3, if they have written a book and you haven't bought it, that's weak. So that's what I had written down right there. So number 2, it was more about like being on a podcast and posting things online. Number 3 was a little bit deeper. Some people actually have written a book, and I know I alluded to that in number 2. But if they've written a book, buy it, read it, leave them a review. There's a guy I know named Brian Lamana who crushes it in sales. He and I actually had him on this podcast once. He talked about how one of his prospects had written a book. It had like 0 reviews. And he got it, read it, left a massive review. Of course, that person's going to meet with you. So again, another person that I am trying to sell to right now, they wrote a children's book. Of course, I bought it for my daughter, read it, and took a picture with us and sent it to him. And of course, he met with me. Like number 2 and number 3 are very similar, but if they put anything out into the world, you've got to find it. We live in an age where you can find things about people. And again, as buyers become closer and closer to like my age, there's going to be more and more that you can find online about people. Right now, maybe some people, there's nothing, but I think you'd be surprised if you did a little bit of digging how much you could actually find. Number 4, this is important. So one of the mistakes that I made early on in my sales career was like when you get to the end of a call, and a lot of the sales that I have been doing have been like over Zoom, but regardless of it, if it's in person or over Zoom, you want to talk about what are next steps at the end of your call. So you have a conversation, they like the product. What the person that you're selling to is likely going to do is like, oh, well, let me, go talk to my team or let me think about it. And that's great. I know they need to think about it. They need to talk to their team. But if you can clarify next steps and say, okay, can we meet next week? How, can we meet 2 weeks from now, then even if they're not ready to meet again, even if they don't have a decision made, that is a very clear point for them to think about you because you have a time on the calendar. And then when that time comes up, even if they need to reschedule, they still thought of you, and it gives you kind of a touch point with them, as opposed to not scheduling anything at all and then kind of like reaching out to them, and then they don't feel obligated to respond to you because they never agreed to meet with you, and then they keep pushing and pushing, and we all know that time kills all deals. Now, the point that I was actually trying to make is, yes, absolutely clarify next step, have a next call on the calendar, but always in the call relationally. Shout out to you, Josh Swing, if you're listening to this right now. This is some of the feedback he gave me within the first 2 months of me being in my sales role. You get to the end of the call and you want to make sure that you clarify next steps. Here's what we learned today. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the next steps. Okay, great. See ya. But at the beginning of the call, because I've been interested over interesting, because I know about their child in college, because I know about their vacation plans, because I know about their dog, because I know about how they're a runner because they're wearing a Garmin watch and I ask about it, then at the end of the call, I always try to say, hey, enjoy your run this weekend, or hope you have fun with your daughter in town. And one thing that I found is I'm not trying to trick people into liking me, but it's just a simple human behavior thing. It feels a little bit transactional on the call when you're ending with, okay, sounds good. I will talk to you about next steps next week. But then if you can bring it back to something relational, back to the human element at the end of the call, they're going to associate you with someone that cares about them. So the call starts with, oh, great, I want to learn about you. I want to know about your story. And then it's also going to end with you bringing that up. And it also shows them that you are listening and that you care. So in conversations with people, yes, get the next step settled, but make sure that you end it relationally. Number 5, relevant follow-up. Relevant follow-up. So a lot of times in sales, I've been shocked at how much I've had to do this, but even if you schedule time on the calendar with someone, to my point before, even if you schedule the next steps and that those next steps are 2 weeks out, I can guarantee you that most of the time your prospect is not laying in bed at night thinking about buying your product. They have all of their own issues. They're probably super busy. Their inbox is flooded. They're probably leading people. And so they're not sitting around thinking about you and your product all day long. And so how do we get them to continue thinking about us and move towards making a decision in action? Well, staying top of mind. What you don't want to do is send an email and say, hey, just wanted to remind you about our call next week. See you then. Or, hey, just wanted to, remind you to be thinking about this. When you follow up with someone, it needs to be relevant and it needs to be valuable. And so one thing that I found is it's not annoying if I can send someone a valuable email. So a lot of times what I'm really saying in my email is, hey, you told me that you were going to go talk to your CEO about this, and I'm basically emailing you to remind you to do that, but in a professional way. I don't want to say, you said you were going to go talk to your CEO, please go do that. I'm holding you accountable right now. You don't want to bother them. And so really a way to do that is, hey, you mentioned this on our call and I heard this podcast and thought of you. Hope you like it. P.S. Hope your conversation with your CEO goes well. Talk to you next week. So what I'm doing is I'm getting the message across that hey, make sure you do what you said you were going to do. Make sure you get approval for the contract. Make sure you have the conversation you need to. Make sure you, check out our product or whatever. But also here's something for you. And so the relevant follow-up, the valuable follow-up, that's my whole point. Instead of just emailing someone, holding their hand and babysitting them, how can you send them something valuable? Essentially what it does is it gives you an excuse to follow up with someone as opposed to just being annoying. Number 6, ask one more question. This applies relationally and from a sales standpoint. So for example, if someone ever says oh yeah, so my daughter, blah, 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 I will always ask, oh, you said you had a daughter. How old is she? Where does she live? And people are usually kind of caught off guard, oh, you want to know about my family? And I'm yeah, I want to hear about it. And so asking one more question has always gone such a long way. And when I say one more, I'm not saying ask one question. I'm saying you're in the flow of conversations. And one thing that I found is you kind of get to the point where maybe you've asked people a lot of questions and you're kind of interrogating them about their life, or certainly in the sales process. And it kind of gets to a point where you need to respond and you need to say something back. But a lot of times I have found so much success in just asking that one more question. Then people really open up, because I think what it does is it shows them, wait, this person isn't just blowing smoke. They're not just trying to build rapport. They actually want to know me. And so I think the one more question from a relational standpoint, I talked about someone mentioning their daughter. Well, you might, because of time and everything, and because it's a sales call, you might feel like you need to move on and talk about the product. But if you can ask one more and say, oh, tell me about your daughter, then on the next call, when you're like, oh, you said your daughter was doing a triathlon. How did it go? That stuff goes a long way. Also, certainly in the sales process, you definitely want to ask one more question as well. And so if someone says, yeah, my managers are a little bit worried about how much time this might take. You might say, can you tell me from the time standpoint, can you tell me more about that? And then they start sharing, and then you ask one more question. Basically, I think a lot of times we stop too short, and maybe we feel like we have the information that we need. And if you can just dig like a little bit deeper, it will go a very long way. Number 7, you can't work smarter if you're not smart yet. So people often say work smarter, not harder. This is something that I think I could have done a better job at over the last couple of years. Um, I think that I love consistency. I love doing the same thing. I love habits. And so I think that really pays off. At times, I think I did learn enough to be able to work a little bit smarter than I have. Part of that is my wiring on the strengths finders. Strategic is not very high for me. There's not a lot of strategic strengths that I have. And so I have to work really hard to think about like strategy and everything. And so that's one thing that I'm personally working on. But an example of this is when you're early on in a sales career, when you're selling a product for the first time, you may want to try to work smarter, and so you want to make the most use of your time. And so people talk about all these like prospecting tips and everything. And I think the best way to learn is reps, like reps over time. And so there was a lot of SDRs in the early days that talked about all these hacks to booking meetings. And while that's great, I learned like, I'm not really smart yet. I haven't been selling for more than 3 months. I don't even know our product that much. I don't even know the person I'm selling to that much. So I need reps. And so instead of trying to work smarter, I said, I'm going to make 100 calls a day. And then that way you'll learn so much faster, and then you can work smarter. And so whether this is in sales or in life, people always say work smarter, not harder. And yes, there are people that work their whole lives and make like not that much money, even though they've worked way harder than anyone else. And that's because they didn't work smarter. They just worked hard the whole time. So at some point you do need to transition into being a little bit smarter and strategic with your life and your work and your sales. But in the beginning, I always just say work, twice as hard as anybody else, make twice as many calls as anybody else, because you're not even smart yet. And the quickest way to get smart is to work hard and put in the reps. That's what I'm pretty passionate about. Number 8, don't let the highs be too high or the lows be too low. Yeah, I can be a pretty emotional person. And so when something good happens, I get fired up. And when something bad happens, I can get pretty down. And while it's really important to celebrate really big things and, be upset when things don't go well, sales is a roller coaster. I mean, there are going to be super high highs and super low lows. There will be days where I have 8 calls on the calendar and all 8 of them show up and love it. And then there'll be days where I have 8 calls on the calendar and literally every single person doesn't even reschedule. They like ghost me and then never respond to me again. And so if you're riding this roller coaster of emotions and your emotions are dictated by your circumstances, then that could be a really challenging mindset to have for your sales career, because there's constantly highs and constantly lows, but honestly, there's probably more lows than there are highs. And so if you can just focus a little bit more on what are the daily actions that I need to do, and if I know that I do these things, there's going to be highs and there's going to be lows, but I'm always trending upwards. I'm getting 1% better every day. So don't focus too much on your emotions. And like, even when something amazing happens, yes, celebrate and get super happy, but don't bank your identity and your happiness on your circumstances. Because then when something bad happens, and bad things happen in sales more than good things happen, then you'll probably do the opposite and you'll be really down on yourself. Kind of similar to that, number 9, be a goldfish. I think Ted Lasso didn't come up with this, but I remember in the show, he talks about that a little bit. Have a short memory. So like when you get on a call and it doesn't really go well, or when you're cold calling someone and they hang up on you, or when you say something embarrassing on a call, or you kind of swing and miss, if you let that get you down, then you lose your confidence. And if you're not confident when you're selling, then people are going to be able to sniff that out immediately. So I think having a short memory, again, this is in sales or in anything in life. In sports, like the best athletes are the ones that can go down, miss 5 shots in a row, and then go down and shoot confidently and make that 6th one. And so being a goldfish, having a short memory, not attaching your identity to your outcomes, that's going to take you a really long way as well. Number 10, ruthlessly disqualify people. you know deep down that there's literally no chance that this person is going to buy from you. So this is one thing that I could have done a lot better as well. I think a lot of times we try to make ourselves believe that there's someone that you're talking to that, oh, well, they're really nice and, they say that they kind of like my thing. But if somebody is like no showing you, or they're constantly rescheduling, or they're constantly saying they're going to do something and then they don't do it, then like at some level, you probably know deep down this person isn't going to buy and you're going to waste your time. Some of the best reps that I know have a massive amount of respect for their own personal time and their own personal calendar. Because if you're wasting time in sales, then like you're wasting time. There's only so many hours in a day. There's only so many prospects to talk to. And so the conversations that you're in, you want to make sure that they're the valuable ones. You want to make sure that that person is actually interested. And so, if you're talking to someone that's never going to buy from you, you could be spending that time doing any other revenue generating activity. And I think that, again, we lie to ourselves for certain reasons and try to believe that someone's going to buy from you when they're probably not. So I think being bolder and ruthlessly disqualifying people, and even part of that would be giving them an out, saying like, hey, I've really enjoyed talking to you. Is this something that you really think you're going to be able to get done right now? Or should we, come back to this in 6 months from now, or maybe even never? Number 11, don't burn bridges. People come back around. So I am 26, haven't been working a super long time. Some of the mentors that I have told me that you'll be blown away at who you cross paths with even 10 years from now. You'll be blown away at who you cross paths with 10, 20, 30 years from now that you think that you'll never see again. And I found this to be true even in, 4 years of sales. There are people who, 4 years ago, I tried to reach out to, and I was an idiot. I didn't know anything about prospecting. I didn't know anything about our product hardly, and I totally botched it. Or there's someone who I made it to the end of the sales process with them, and then they just like couldn't follow through. They couldn't get it done. And while deep down that's frustrating to me and it makes me angry, I'm not going to blow them off. If someone ever emails me and is like, hey, we can't move forward, I'm not just going to not respond or send something rude back. I'm going to say, hey, it's totally okay. Maybe we'll reconnect again at some point. And what I've found is like 4 years into it, there's some of those people that are actually coming back around. And I think that as more time goes on and as your network grows more, that will only happen more. And so people talk. I've known in the sales world, like there's certain reps that get a really good reputation or a really bad one, and people are going to talk and they'll ask, hey, tell me about this Hampton guy. Tell me about this company, this product. And if you've burned bridges with people, then like it's really going to hurt you. And so, it's in sales, again, in life, you are going to come in contact with people again. And so it's never wise to burn bridges with anybody. Number 12, a handwritten note. In the digital age that we're in, it is, becoming less and less common to write handwritten notes. And I think that that goes a really long way. Now, my generation, I don't know how much that means, but some of the older people that I sell to, I mean, I've written a few handwritten notes recently and they act like I, raised their child for them. And so I know it takes time. I know you have to slow down. I know you have to, find an address and a stamp and write the note and send it to them and everything. But it goes a really long way to write a handwritten note. And then here's a bonus one as we end here. This is kind of an overarching thesis statement, if you will. Everything in life is sales, whether you are a CEO of a company, whether you're a babysitter and you're selling yourself, whether you're in ministry and you're trying to get people to volunteer, you're always selling something, whether you get a paycheck for it or not. And some of the biggest advice that I've been given that I've tried to share on this podcast is when you're young, and I know some of us are older, some of us are younger, especially for those of us that are like young professionals or maybe even in college, I would say choose something that is going to give you transferable skills, because likely your first job is not, you're going to be your dream job. You're not going to do that forever. And so I don't want anybody to waste time. And one way to essentially guarantee that you're not going to waste time is to cut your teeth doing sales. Whether it's door-to-door sales, whether it's selling technology, whether it's selling a product, if you can learn to master the art of showing up, master consistency, learn to be a goldfish, learn to get rejected over and over and over again, you bet your bottom dollar that that is going to impact you in basically every area of your life. You might spend a few years in sales and then never be in it again. It doesn't matter. Those skills are transferable. And so I think it's a win for anyone that does any kind of sales, even if it's like selling cars or like solar, like that stuff is good. You'll learn a lot. Like if you're knocking on doors and getting rejected or making cold calls and getting rejected, that is going to transform you into somebody that is resilient and knows how to work hard. And so if there's anyone in your life that's like trying to figure out what to do with their life, especially if they're younger, tell them to go into some type of sales. It is transferable skills that will impact them. And again, for me, this is the first time now that I have a job title that is not technically sales, but there is so much of an element of sales to that job. And I'm confident that no matter what I do, I may never have a sales title again. It's all going to be sales. So I appreciate you listening to this. It's time for you and me to wake up and lead.